Hello, and welcome to everyone that's getting on the call. We're just letting people in. We're glad you're with us for our HdL's latest California sales tax summary. Just at the beginning here, and we'll have this in the chat, couple of notes. We are recording the presentation. And so in the chat, there's some notes about just reminding you that once this is recorded, as a registrant, we'll be sending out the recording to you, so you'll have that for your record. And then we always are very interested in hearing from our audience. During the course of the presentation, we ask that you would put your questions in the chat box, and my colleagues and I are going to do our best to answer those as we go through the hour we have together. And if we don't get to anything in that time, we'll certainly make sure we address your questions at the end of our session today. So very glad you're with us. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Ken Noroff, one of the principals on the HdL Sales Tax team. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Brett Plumley and Susie Woodstock. So we're going to have a shared about an hour of content for you that we hope you'll find very valuable and useful in your budgeting that's just underway in the new year here. Of course, you know a lot about our company. We've been around over 40 years. We serve local government exclusively, and our goal is to find ways to make sure that you're getting all the money you're entitled to and doing all the analytics and information providing like this and forecasting. We've done great work over those 4 decades and look forward to many more. I want to just jump right in. I'm going to do some high-level overviews to start with. And so this is just daylighting for you the most recent set of data we just got a couple of weeks ago, the second quarter of 2025, which closes out the fiscal year. And you will see here that we obtained a 0.6% increase in statewide sales taxes for this particular quarter. You'll note at the bottom here, we had projected really unchanged or flat, down 0.1% loss. So results were very close to what we had expected. I also wanted to highlight for you, wanted to take some time because we're at the end of the fiscal year, wanted to show you what the overall statewide results are looking like. They ended down 0.5% for the year. We had been estimating in these economic forecasts and these webinars that we've been doing dating back to September that the revenues would decline somewhere around 1%. And so again, the annualized results we're very proud of came in very close to what we've been estimating over the last few quarters. Just some themes, and we'll probably hit on some of these as we go through the 8 industry groups that we talk about in these meetings. And these boxes are color-coded just to give you an inclination, green being favorable in terms of potential statewide revenue collections going up, yellow, more caution, red, a concern. And so we've talked, over many months now about tariffs and inflation, and it's been an ongoing challenge for us, and I think for you to figure out when are they happening, how are they happening, what's getting tariffed, how's that affecting prices. So we know those are some negatives. Consumer sentiment is creating some overall uncertainty. We're seeing an uptick in unemployment, and particularly in some industries like the tech sector in California. So we're concerned about where that is headed and how that may affect spending in the future. Seen a recent result on interest rates where the Feds cut those this month. We've got a couple of slides related to that. Consumer spending, interestingly, even with all the turbulence in the economy and households not really feeling confident about where the economy is headed, they're still spending money. And you're going to see that evidenced as we roll out our forecast today. And we are noticing a fair amount of business investment that's going on, really with the advent of AI and a lot of things. We're seeing some areas of the state where there's pretty substantial capital outlays, and that is generating, in a positive sense, some anticipated growth in our sales taxes. So the interest rates, we've had this slide up before. It hasn't changed much until recently with the 0.25% reduction. What's interesting is we've already been kind of anticipating in the back half of 2025 that rates would begin to fall. We've had that in our outlook. And so I think what's important to take away is this minor reduction in borrowing costs on auto loans and consumer credit and the like really isn't going to create a surge or a big boost in consumer spending. We think it might end up being a little more favorable to businesses when they look at their lending costs and capital spending. So we are not really altering our forecast in any measurable way just because of this 25% basis point decline that occurred by the Feds this month. This chart is just trying to give you a sense of consumer spending and where things have been. So as I said, consumers aren't spending. Credit card data by B of A here says household spending was up 1.8% year over year. This is as of July. It's varying when we look into the data and understand how that growth is happening at different socioeconomic classes. Tends to be better wage growth in middle and higher income earners, which is contributing to that growth. We did note that in this chart that there's been quite a cooling since May in terms of payroll growth, and that may be a bit of a headwinds in terms of spending in some of these areas that are shown here. We tend to want to keep tabs on not just spending, but savings. And this is a chart we get from the Bureau of Economic Analysis each quarter. You can see there's a bit of an uptick in the second quarter, 4.6% in savings. We think that, again, represents a little bit of caution from consumers who aren't really sure where the economy is headed, and maybe being a little more thrifty in terms of building that nest egg in terms of household savings. Goods and services, goods being taxable, services generally not being taxable. Just trying to look at these recent trends over the last few years. More recently, we saw a huge surge back in the post-COVID years of buying a lot of goods, a lot of home improvement, auto buying, all kinds of things. That really cooled off a lot. That has started to pick up more recently in 2025. And the inverse effect of that, which is here in the purple line, is showing that the outlays for services have actually been in decline. We suspect that the broadening cost burden is kind of keeping the monthly pace of goods inflation elevated at least through this year. And that's driving some of the results that you see here. Stockpiling. So with tariffs oncoming and underway in various shapes with various countries, et cetera, trying to keep tabs on what's been happening with goods, and so much of what we consume and is subject to sales tax is imported. So big year over year growth from January to July of this year, up 12% imported goods. You can see here the 4.1% average over the last 20 years. So we're kind of tripling that. And in relation to this, there's also been a huge goods trade deficit, again, up much more substantially than anticipated. You can see the green line here, which is really reflecting what's happening in terms of imports. And a lot of that was in anticipation in the early part of the year of tariffs beginning starting in April, even though we know a lot of that has been delayed. This is a chart, probably a lot of information here, but I think what's important to look at is back in April with about a $48 million outlay in consumer spending. A lot of things were more oriented towards items that aren't generating taxes, meaning goods rather than services. We're here in July, and that number more than doubled. We're up over $108 billion. And you can see in the orange lines how some of the shifting occurred, particularly take a look at the top bar, that's motor vehicles. And so we have seen a lot of pull forward spending or buying from consumers anticipating tariffs will be driving up prices. So when we kind of roll everything together and look at the overall trends here on a quarter by quarter basis, you'll notice the last couple of fiscal years, were negative results. The year that we just closed, like I mentioned, was down 0.5%. But we are anticipating, and we're going to walk through the details here in a moment, of starting to turn the corner, seeing a bit of an increase of 1.4% overall in this current FY 25-26 year, and then starting to see even further improvement in the coming year. So we have an opportunity now to hear from my colleagues, and we're going to start with Brett, who's going to talk to us about autos.
Thank you, Kent. And we are now going to go into all of the 8 major industry groups, starting here with autos and transportation. And this chart is looking at new vehicle pricing. We can see, consistent with the story that Ken's talking about over the post-COVID time period, big steep increase here on pricing that took place over that period, and now it's been flattening out. The most recent quarter that we're talking about today, second quarter 25, up just a modest 0.3%, but growth is positive in this industry since we've had 9 out of 10 quarters basically of decline. On the right side, the inventory, steep decline 21, 22, and now starting to come back up. This indicates supply chain recovery, but it's still not back at historic norms. Tariffs that Ken mentioned, and we've talked about so much the last several quarters, trying to anticipate if and when the tariffs will hit the various major industry groups. Autos and transportation is one that we can and will anticipate eventually the prices will be passed along to the consumers, but so far, still minimal impact on prices, and mainly the stockpiling that Ken was talking about is happening in this industry with parts. Some of the major dealers, Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Honda, profits have been hit really hard. Price increases are coming. We do expect, and the analysts expect, 8% increase by year end, $5,000 more on imported vehicles, and about $1,000 on US made cars. And most of that's coming from the impact of tariffs on the parts that are going into the production of the vehicles. And the ripple effects, higher used car prices. We're going to continue to see rising repair costs, and the affordability, it's going to be a squeeze on lower income households. Electric vehicles, we've seen a surge here, and most of this is attributable, a lot of it's attributable to a credit that has been out there, $7,500 on electric vehicles. This is expiring at the end of September, and so we should see this slowdown post-credit. Some of the manufacturers that have been doing really well, some of the dealers outperforming the rest of the market, Hyundai, Honda, Prologue, General Motors had a record month. Tesla is the exception this quarter, significantly down, and so that's actually brought the overall results down in the quarter in autos and transportation in total. Here, this one's talking about recent forecasts, kind of all over the board is the story here. 2025, they're ranging between 1.3% to the negative and 2% almost to the good. 2026 forecasts, they're pretty scarce. Outlook does remain uncertain. That's the word that continues to dominate, and the overall theme is that the industry does see stabilization now, and I talked about that little blip upward statewide in this quarter, but there is still a wide risk band at this point. Here's the overall forecast for autos and transportation, and as Ken mentioned, 2 consecutive fiscal years of decline, and this is the theme we're going to see consistently as we look at all the major industry groups. Autos and transportation down 5.6% in fiscal year 23-24, down another almost 2% in this most recently completed fiscal year, and then pretty flat in 25-26. I mean, a little bit of positivity in some of the new motor vehicles. Overall, down second quarter 25, about 0.9%, and this would have been a lot closer to our forecast. Ken mentioned we are proud of how well we've done statewide. for all of 24-25, and in each of the major industry groups, that story is very comparable. So we're down just a little bit, flat in 25-26, and then we start to see recovery of 3% in 26-27, followed by more normal historical growth in this particular sector all the way out to starting in 26-27. We've got boost there, and then 28-29 all the way out, about 4% growth as we move forward. Fuel and service station sector, this is dominated by prices. They're very closely correlated to the sales tax associated. As prices go, typically sales tax goes. And also consistent here, 2 consecutive years of a drop in prices. And now the latest data that we have through almost the end of September, down about 3%. So we're going to see another quarter, third quarter 25 of decline, and then start to see recovery after that. These are the factors that go into the forecast for fuel and service stations. Left side, green means upward pressure on prices. And most of this in California, we're very unique in terms of the comparison to the rest of the country. California regulations from the California Air Resources Board and low carbon fuel standards imposed upon the various refineries that we have in the state definitely have an upward pressure on prices. We also have factored in, we've baked into our forecast a couple of major refineries that will be closing tail end 25 and early 26. That's definitely upward pressure as well. Worldwide events are still in play. OPEC continues to hold on the supply. The middle category, these are neutral. This could change. Ken talked about the Federal Reserve and the most recent drop in interest rates. There's an anticipation of maybe 1, maybe 2 additional interest rate reductions by the end of the calendar year. And that possibly could have some positive impact here, but mostly we've baked in, as Ken mentioned, the boost coming from and anticipated by the Federal Reserve rate reductions. Oil barrel prices have been down. They're still remaining kind of stable compared to where they were last quarter, and no new legislation introduced at this point, but that can change anytime in California. Fuel prices are down and consumption. Those are the major factors that are driving the overall sales tax downward. Here's the chart we've been putting in for several quarters now on fuel consumption, and it shows consumption has been down for a couple of calendar years in a row. 2024 ended down in comparison to 23. The most recent data that we have through almost halfway through 25, down about 1.5%. So consumption is still definitely down in the state of California. This is the chart that we have in here on the capacity of fuel in California. The highlighted box here, the dotted box, those are the refineries that I mentioned are anticipated to close at the end of December 25 and then in April 26. And it's the Valero Energy Benicia refinery, about 9% of the 23% that can be impacted and possibly will be impacted by these closures. There has been discussion that the California legislature may introduce a bill which will allow funding to keep this particular refinery operating. If that's the case, that would have a mitigating impact on prices and possibly bring down the increase that we've built in just a little bit as we go forward in early 2026. Here's the overall forecast, and consistent with autos and transportation and most of the other groups, 2 consecutive fiscal years of decline, 24-25 down significantly, almost 10%. Second quarter 25, we hit the mark on that. We projected 7% decline. Actual results came in negative 7.6. 25-26 fiscal year, we're projecting almost 3.5% growth. We've taken that down just a little bit from last quarter's snapshot picture. We were about 5, and this is still as I mentioned, this is baked in with the refinery closures and with the specific factors in California. And then slow recovery continuing in 26, 27 at 4% growth. Out years, about 3 to 4% as we move forward. Now we're going to talk about building and construction. 3 different areas that impact this sector. On the building side, mortgage rates have been high, and that's kind of a downward pressure overall on the industry itself. The federal solar credit will be ending at the end of calendar year 25, and that has had some one-time blips, one-time positive impacts on various projects throughout the state. We're going to see solar projects starting to come down early 26, and so that will have a downward pressure on the sector in total. Infrastructure projects can have a positive impact, as well as we've seen some positive activities from data centers. So that's positive pressure on the overall sector. In the labor arena, we've talked about ICE and immigration, deportations. If and when that happens, it's very specific to individual agencies throughout the state, and the impact is going to be different depending on what the overall sales tax mix is in any one agency. But this is pressure overall, and can be pressure, the ICE enforcement, upward pressure on costs and potential job site delays. On the cost side, metal prices are up, which is a positive for sales tax in this arena. Lumber futures, I'm going to talk about that in the next slide, have been down. And tariffs, the impact in building and construction, the potential is there for an increase on construction material and prices and homes being built going forward, possibly in the $10,000 to $15,000 range. Building supplies, this chart, basically the story here is it's all over the board. It's been down, it's been up. It's now up a little bit, 1.3% in the most recent data that we have in July 25. This is the largest business type in building and construction, makes up a little more than 50% of the total. So really, as this business type swings, the overall sector moves with it. This really is suggesting short-term instability and not steady growth at this point. Lumber futures, I mentioned this chart that I was going to show you right now, $580. It's been down significantly, almost 13% in the past 6 months. You can see spring and summer growth, and then some stability happening there, but a lot of movement. The takeaway really is lumber remains volatile and it's off recent highs. This reflects cooling construction activity and broader market uncertainty overall. The considerations that go into the forecast in this sector, the Fed, if they do lower the rates again, we've talked about that mostly being baked in. It's also baked into our forecast for building and construction. If they increase it more often or larger than anticipated, that could have a positive impact if they lower the interest rates and the frequency of the lowering. Mortgage rates would then float lower, and this would be positive movement in the market. Federal policy change, as we've seen in autos and transportation and the other sectors, this one included, there's really a lot of uncertainty about funding. And so investments in construction remain kind of on the fence. Data center activity has been positive. Forecast here, again, 2 consecutive fiscal years of decline, 23-24 down 1.7, 24-25 down 1%. Second quarter 25 very flat. We had projected just a little bit of growth, so we were also very close there. But because we still have and are seeing that flattening out, we've taken down the forecast a little bit in 25-26 compared to last quarter. We had building and construction very flat. Now we're at negative 1.5, and then slow recovery starting in 26-27, almost 2% growth. And then hopefully, barring any unforeseen changes, we get back to more normal growth in the out years. closer to 4 and 5% when we get all the way out to 30-31 fiscal year. The last sector I'm going to talk about is food and drugs. It's the smallest one out of the 8 groups. It accounts for 4.5% of the total sales. And we've seen consistent results in this second quarter of 25, very flat. That's been the story. Grocery stores, largest business type, more than half of all the sales tax in this category, very flat in this quarter. Convenience stores, down a little bit. Drugstores, we knew about closures. We're not surprised by the 11.5% drop that we saw in this quarter. And cannabis is continuing the trend that we've seen for quite some time post-COVID. Other trends to note here, drugstore vacancies continue. That's a pattern that we're seeing. Grocery stores and other types of businesses are getting creative. Grocery stores looking at partnering with some other industries. Convenience stores are also trying to get competitive with restaurants possibly and looking at what they're putting onto their shelves. Cannabis trends. I want to point out this one. We just modified this slide yesterday. This recent legislation, AB 564, effective October 1st, 2025. Now, what this means is that the excise tax rate is going to remain in effect at 15%. It was originally going to go up to 18%. And so this legislation maintains that 15% rate from October 1st, 25 through at least July of 2028. Cannabis lounges, a lot of creativity and entertainment and DJs, comedy nights, all in your cannabis lounge coming soon. So very interesting that what is happening in the industry with lounges and also smoke shops, CBD, hemp-derived products. They've really grown steadily in recent years, and we're not seeing any sign of that slowing down at this point. Here's the chart we've been putting in, and very consistent patterns. We saw really strong growth during COVID, post-COVID, and it's been coming down ever since, from really late 21-22 fiscal year all the way to right now. The most recent fiscal year, 24-25 ending, was down 8.7%. And so overall, the forecast, again, 2 consecutive fiscal years of decline. The most recent one down almost 3%. Because we've seen that flattening and dropping, we've taken this down a little bit, 1.4% reduction overall in food and drugs. We had that at a negative 0.6 last quarter's statewide forecast. And then very flat in 26-27, slow recovery. Looks like the worst of the downturn is behind us, but recovery is going to be slow and modest and really not a return anytime soon to strong growth. And with that, I am going to turn over the presentation to Susie.
Okay, thank you, Brett. I'm going to talk about the next 4 major industry groups, and 3 of those 4 groups are impacted by retail. Retail here, so I'm going to start by talking about the total picture of retail. There's 2 types that we break it into: brick and mortar stores and online. And then online, of course, gets broken into if it comes from out of state or if it comes from a in-state fulfillment center. Looking at this graph, you see yellow. The total retail has been positive for the last 3 quarters. People are still buying. They're definitely searching for value, but they're still buying. On the top of this chart, we've got the blue online sales. This is combining both that indirect that goes through our countywide use tax pools and the direct that goes to the agency where the fulfillment centers are located. This is combining it. It's all online sales, and you can see that growth we've been seeing. Again, people searching for values, they can find the best deal online, and that's where they're opting to buy right now. The bottom green line is our brick and mortar stores that are seeing that slowing. We do have a positive outlook for them, but right now you can see the last 5 quarters have been down. Also looking at the overall retail picture and what we're expecting consumers to do. About a third of consumers say that they're going to spend more in the next 6 months. About a third say that they're going to keep their spending habits about the same. And about a third say they're going to spend less. So overall, the consumer expectation is it's going to stay pretty consistent with what we've already been seeing. And then the retail monitor. Brett used the building and garden portion of this in his presentation. This is looking at all the categories here. And what we're seeing is overall core retail sales have been positive for the last 6 months. If you look at July, everybody except that building and construction or the building and garden supply portion, they're all positive. So we are still seeing that people are spending right now, 3 to 7% growth. Ken did talk about overall imports nationally. This is zooming in and looking at just the Port of LA. And to me, what this one is showing is some of the indicators that tariffs are modifying our behavior. January and February were up. March was about the same as last year. April went up, May went down, June and July both went up. A lot of it is in this import category, pulling forward of some of the purchase or some of the merchandise delivery, getting it on shore before the tariffs take effect. We had that 90-day pause. So again, really that big surge in July compared to July of last year. Now we'll look at our general consumer good major industry group. This is the brick and mortar portion. So it was that green line. Here we have the top 10 business types in our general consumer goods category. This quarter, it looks a little better. Last quarter, it was mostly red and we only had one green line. This quarter, we get 4 green lines. The top category, the biggest category, discount department stores, which is about 32% of our brick and mortar general consumer goods, was down. But this discount department store category has Walmart's, Costco's, Target's, which a lot of those also sell fuel. And as we heard from Brett, fuel was down in this quarter. So that can impact some of it rolls all together under one return. So it can impact the discount department store growth there. What we see here, electronics and appliance stores and jewelry stores both had big solid quarters, while department stores were down. The bottom category, variety stores, are dealing with a lot of chapters 11 in that category, and that one is also down. Publicly traded companies offer their guidance, and so we follow that to get a feel for what the environment looks like. This is showing that a lot of the retailers changed their guidance up. This doesn't mean that they're expecting declines or growth. It just means that they changed their guidance from last quarter's report. Target, Ross, Best Buy, and Verizon, their guidance was unchanged, but all these businesses in the green improved their guidance. So for general consumer goods, second quarter came in down 0.6. We had projected it to be down 1%, so it did just a little bit better, but pretty on target. For the year, we were expecting it to be down about 2%, down about 1.7. Going forward, we're expecting it to start to tick up. Slow growth from third quarter to second quarter of 26, going from 0.2 to 1.5% growth. So brick and mortar will grow. You can see, just like some of the other categories, we've had 2 years that the category was negative, looking at it to slowly start to return in 25, 26, and 26, 27, a little bit more growth at 1.3. Next, we get to the countywide use tax pools. We already talked about that there is general consumer goods. This is the online retail that comes from out of state. But you can see the use tax pools are more than just that online retail. We've got business and industry here, almost the same size as the general consumer goods. Both of these groups were up about 5% in this quarter. Also building and construction stuff that comes from out of state, but also if a contractor installs their product, the sales tax will go to the county where the product was installed. So if the contractor does their own install, the sales tax goes to this use tax pool. Autos and transportation, that's private party to private party sales. It doesn't tend to follow the industry, the used vehicle businesses that Brett talked about. This is private to private, and it kind of goes on its own way. And then restaurants and hotels. Restaurants and hotels is food delivery services. Breaking it down a little bit further into business types, the top 2 business types that are 28% of the statewide use tax pools is marketplace sellers. Marketplace sellers is our Etsy's, Temu, Amazon. It's the pretty much exclusive online sellers. And again, this is coming from out of state, and you can see it's up only 0.9%. Next is apparel and some other miscellaneous general consumer goods category. This is 13% and it's up 9%. So a little bit stronger growth from the sales that are more direct sales from businesses versus the online sellers. In the business and industry category, we have medical biotech, light industry, business services, medical biotech up 12.9% in the pools. That's about 6% of the pool. Overall, these top 10 categories are 60% of the pool, up 4.2%. The pool was up 3.9% this quarter. Looking at the considerations for the forecast for the pool, that e-commerce is going to continue to rise. But we're expecting this out-of-state e-commerce to grow a little bit slower than the in-state. Overall, we're expecting e-commerce to grow significantly, but this will be a little slower than what we'll see in our business and industry category in a few minutes. Tariffs are not a significant impact just yet. Again, it's really waiting. They're still not clear as to when we'll see it. A lot of the companies are still absorbing some of the tariff impacts. So not a lot of tariffs have been worked into the forecast yet. Overall, the economic outlook that consumers will continue to spend. Some of the slowing in spending impacts brick and mortar more than it will in this pool category. And with that, we're looking at second quarter came in at 3.7% for the pools. That was forecast at about 4%, so it was a little bit slower. For the year, we had it forecast at about 3.9%. So again, it came in at 3.2%, just a little bit slower, but pretty close on that forecast. Overall, for the future, we're looking at a few strong quarters and then leveling out to 3% going forward. That gives us 3.5% for 25-26 and 3% for 26-27. Then we get to our business and industry group. This is a big eclectic group. It has a lot of different types of business and industry. You can see here we've got medical biotech, light and heavy industry, garden and agriculture, and of course it has the fulfillment centers. The fulfillment centers that are located in the state are 28% of this. So that retail category is really going to have some influence on the bottom line of this category. And it's actually masking some of what we're seeing in some of these other categories. You can see the total business and industry group was up 3.9% this quarter, but there's some big green bars and some big red bars, and a flat. Medical and biotech, it's the biggest category besides fulfillment centers. It's 9% of our business and industry group. That was flat this quarter. The two big green bars that are really pushing our forecast much higher than what we were expecting is electrical equipment and office equipment. These are the two categories that have a lot of the AI projects in them. So that AI expansion is where we're seeing it. And you can see the office equipment is up. Office equipment isn't like staples and tape. This is computer equipment, servers, and other computer related items. And you can see that's up almost 38%. So these are the two categories that are really pushing this 3.9%, along with fulfillment centers. Look at the in-state fulfillment centers are up 9.5%. The out-of-state online shopping was up only 0.9%. So again, The business models want the merchandise as close to the delivery point as possible, and these in-state fulfillment centers are seeing more growth from that retail sector than the out-of-state fulfillment centers. Down here, you can see the fulfillment center 9.5, but you also see energy and utilities. Energy and utilities here has the other half of the solar projects. Brett talked about some of the solar projects can influence building and construction. This also has some of the technical side of the energy projects, solar, energy storage in big battery projects, power line projects, but that is it really fluctuates. It's sporadic revenue, and you can see that it's way down right now because last year we had some really big projects. There are some big projects in the works that will bring this back up again. It's only 3% of the total. It's just that it can have some really big swings. Looking at just the fulfillment centers, again, this is 28% of the business and industry group. The last 13 of the last 14 quarters have been positive. And you can see even our last 4 have been some strong growth. Again, more and more in-state fulfillment centers are being used. Looking at the agriculture sector, it's 9% of business and industry. The agriculture sector is looking at the business of agriculture. What drives sales tax in this group is buying big equipment, the cost of the irrigation, the buying fertilizer and soil stabilizers, buying the seeds. So it's the business of agriculture, not necessarily what the agriculture produces. But when agriculture produces less, then they're going to buy less equipment. This is a category that has been down for the last couple of years, and it's got a lot of challenges. We've got the agriculture workers, about 50% are undocumented. If you don't have the workers to produce the crops that feed the business, you're going to see slowing. It is one of the categories where we think the lower interest rates can help. When interest rates are lower, farmers tend to buy more equipment. One of the concerns related to tariffs here is that exports to China dropped 50% in the first half of 25. Again, that doesn't directly affect our sales tax, but if the farmers don't have a market to sell to, they'll stop buying the things that do impact the sales tax. Overall, for the business and industry group, kind of summarizing the things we're looking at when we're looking at the forecast. The fulfillment centers, again, this is 28%, expecting 4 to 5% growth going forward. The light and heavy industry, the PMI remains below. The tariff uncertainty is impacting the planning and the outlook. So slowing in that light and heavy industry group. Medical biotech also facing a lot of headwinds. The NIH cuts, loss of talent, pharma tariffs could result in shortages. So this is also facing headwinds. We saw this group came in flat in that second quarter. And then agriculture, we just touched on that a little deeper this quarter, looking at the tariffs impacting not only, like I mentioned, that it could impact our exports, but the impact of the cost of that equipment, the availability of the equipment that the agriculture industry might be purchasing. Again, interest rate reductions help this group. They've got those labor challenges and, of course, concerns over if they can sell their product. Wrapping that all up, we can see what our forecast is here. So second quarter came in higher. We were expecting this to be down a little, came in at 3.9%. Again, we saw that those AI-related purchases, those can be project-related. They can have some fluctuation to them. And that brought this overall amount up too. We were expecting it to come in a little bit lower, around 0.5%, ended up 1.7%. Again, the other part of that is the fulfillment center. So 2 big things that are really driving some of this positive and are kind of masking some of the challenges in the other industries in this group. Rolling everything together, looking forward at expecting about a 1.2% growth, and then getting a little further out, looking at about 3.1%. And then on to our last industry group, the restaurant and hotel in major industry group. Looking at these 7 business types for the category. You can see fast food, quick service, and fast casual restaurants were our 2 negatives. This is unique to California. Nationally, people are still eating out, but they are looking for deals. They're looking for value. They're eating out a little less often, but when they do eat out, they are looking for the best price they can get. And of course, this industry has been hit with rising menu prices because of their labor challenges and the increase in the cost of food and operations. Here in California, we also had AB 1228 that required the fast food restaurants to increase their minimum wage. And we're seeing a differing from the nationwide trend of diners going from casual dining to the less pricey fast food options. But here in California, people are still going to the casual dining options, and we're seeing slowing in both of our quick service and our fast casual. Fine dining has been down for several years now as people, again, have been looking for value and deals. They're not splurging. Our casual dining restaurants are doing a really good job of offering those value meals, offering those 2-for-1 type deals, or come out for dinner and a date type deals. And you can see that that's paying off. They're up 2%. Leisure and entertainment is back positive. This was seeing some slowing last quarter, but that was impacted by those Southern California fires. Food delivery and catering up 10%. This has campus food service, so schools and work campuses. So as more people go back to work, you can see that we're seeing an increase in this. Looking at what the National Restaurant Association thinks of the economic outlook, because Ken touched on disposable income. The National Restaurant Association says a key driver of restaurant sales is disposable personal income. You can see they're forecasting it to slow down. It's still positive for the next 2 years, but 24 was at 2.7 and expecting it to be about 1.4 and 1.2. So that could, again, slow down the amount of times or the type of restaurants that people are going to. Like I said, menu prices have continued to rise. They have had challenges with labor shortages, that increase in minimum wage for certain types of restaurants, overall operating costs increasing, but also the tariffs can impact some of the restaurants. Here's just a few things that, we think of wine or some of the imported food products that could be impacted by the tariffs, but you don't think about the takeout containers or the equipment that the restaurants have to buy, the tables, the chairs, all of that can be impacted by the tariffs. And so especially the packaging for the takeout containers, that is an important part of all restaurants. Of course, that was a big pivot during the pandemic, and it has continued. It is a big portion of restaurants right now. And so that can impact, again, some of their operating costs that they have to buy more expensive containers. Right now, the industry is saying that it's just a wild card in their menu pricing. Restaurants are really good about pivoting. They're going to find new suppliers, new strategies, and they'll adjust. Overall, keeping menu prices down is their goal. And there's other things that are causing the menu prices to continue to experience that upward pressure. Visit California and the tourism side of the restaurant hotel group has a pretty positive outlook. They're expecting 4% annual growth in 2026, and you can see it continues up. These two bar graphs go out to 2029. They are saying that international visits are down while domestic is up. Vegas has reported that they saw the lowest tourism in a long time, and their biggest decline was Californians visiting Vegas. So Californians were spending local. They were offsetting our lack of international visitors this summer. But again, Visit California has a 4% growth outlook for visitor spending. So the overall considerations for the restaurant hotel group, again, Visit California projects growth. We expect menu prices to continue to increase. If menu prices went up and everybody stays the same, then our sales tax revenue would go up. So that is a growth option. But of course, as menu prices go up, people tend to eat out a little bit less. So that kind of offsets some of it. And as the disposable income gets lower, people will eat out less. Things keeping it kind of steady. Hotel management projects flat for hotel visits. Restaurant operators are 50-50 on whether they'll see an increase or a decrease in the next 6 months. So kind of a flat projection there. And Black Box, which is a restaurant analysis group, says they expect flat to slightly positive results. So rolling all those together, expecting about 2.1% for restaurant and hotels over the next fiscal year 25-26. For restaurants, another one we expected a little less than 1%. It came in at 1.2, so a little better than our projection had. We expected about 1.1 for the year, came in at 1.3. So again, really close on that forecast. Expecting it to step up, about 2% growth for next year. You can see 1Q26 has a 4% growth, kind of an outlier in this trend, and that is the rebound from this 0.2 in 1Q25 that was brought down by the fires, by the impacts of the fires and the lack of tourism during that time. So that's just a rebound from last year's dip, but expecting about 2% in 25-26 and 26-27 about 3.4. If you look at the last 20 years, the average growth for restaurants is 5 to 6%. So even though these are positive and good solid numbers, it is still lower than what that long-term historic average has been. And that is the end of my major industry groups. I will turn it back over to Ken.
Thank you, Susie and Brett. Really appreciate all the insight and observations and the outlook as we break down the major groups. So I'm down to the home stretch here, and we've still got some time for questions if you want to put those in the chat. This is just giving you the look back and trying to show you on a statewide level a reminder that, as we've said in the past, COVID was pretty dramatic, but the recovery of it was pretty significant. So the loss in revenue in 1920 was more than made up substantially by people spending away in fiscal years 21 and 22. And then, as I mentioned, we've got a couple of years now of people pulling back, absorbing price increases, being more cautious about what they're buying, how much of what they're buying, and we saw declines. And so we do have this overall growth of 1.4% in this current FY26 year. I think it's important to note that that money in the aggregate, when you look at it statewide, isn't really going to get us back to a point where we can get above the 22, 23 levels. It's kind of hard to see here in the chart, but we've been in a bit of a valley where revenues are down. And so for those of you that rely heavily on sales taxes as part of your general fund revenues and as a big resource for delivering services and dealing with infrastructure needs and the like, your revenue growth really is not keeping up with your cost of business, unfortunately. And we don't start to see that getting better until we get out here in the next few years. We continue to pay attention to the possibilities of recession, but we do not have recession, a recession built into these numbers that you see here on this chart. So if any questions come in, I'll just let my colleagues kind of pay attention to that. We're happy to answer those. I did want to just make an announcement. Many of you already employ HdL to assist you with your business license services, but this is just a slide here that just offers an opportunity to do that. Some of the things and benefits that may come from considering using our services in terms of getting your business license administration and compliance, et cetera, under a different way of operating or collecting those revenues. There is a QR code here on the lower left that you're welcome to scan, and then our colleague Johnny in the chat also just put in some links in there. So if you would find that easier, it would just take you to a place where there would be more information and we could follow up and assist you for any of you on the call that might have interest. So I don't see any other questions. I'm just kind of looking at Brett or Susie to see if I'm missing anything, but I don't think so. And so we're very grateful, as always, that you take time out of your day to join us. And we would very much appreciate following up. This is how to get a hold of us if you have further questions. I see, Brett, you had your hand up. So
yeah, I just wanted to mention that there is a hand up. Huey Dang had hand up. I'm not sure. I don't see a question in the chat, but I see a hand up.
Okay. I'm happy to take the question. Huey, if you want to go ahead. Not hearing anything, so.
I'm not sure that the attendees can talk. I
Speak.
think we need the questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can hang on for a second and again, we hope the information today was helpful to you as you're beginning your new fiscal year. And we thank you very much for being a part of our presentation this morning.